The Open Art Fair went to see Joost van den Bergh to talk about his business, and in particular to look at his new exhibition, Double Take.
I set up my business in 1996, and before that I was actually a restorer of paper. So I did paper conservation at Camberwell, and I practiced as a private paper conservator, only art on paper, not books. I think I still have an affinity to paper in a way, and particularly within the more ritual Indian art. So in the 90s, I found this catalogue in Portobello, which had this beautiful red cover with very bold white letters that just said Tantra. I had no idea what that meant. And I started looking at that. And that immediately had a response within me. And what I saw there, these very abstract geometric forms and shapes with a very historical meaning. And most of that's on paper. Okay. So I still have become quite a sort of specialist in that field now. I've done about 4 or 5 exhibitions with catalogues. And a lot of that is still on paper, and those are still, I think, my preferred kind of things that I deal in and work with. Tantra is, in a way, this sort of, it's not a religion, it's not really a philosophy, it's like a way of living in a way. It's a bit of a combination of other religions, such as Hinduism, Tibetan, Buddhism rather. There's some Jain elements in it, but it's none of those.
Okay.
But they are influenced by it. The actual first tantric texts stem from very, very early dates in Nepal. It's a combination of lots of different things. And I think maybe that's partly why I'm fascinated by it, because it's so complex and so difficult to understand and to go through. There's so much imagery related to it. And in fact, the tantric art that I deal in, we call it tantric art. Of course, it is not art. They are manuals, they're instructions, there are manuscripts. They're not meant to be art, but we see them as art because we think they're beautiful images. So currently I'm having a sort of exhibition by appointment because of the times we live in, with a client who's become a very good friend.
So it's works from and inspired by the collection of Christian Zacharias.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Christian is someone I met about 6 or 7 years ago. Became a good client and a good friend. We called it Double Take because that seemed a good name, and it also has a slight musical connection because Christian is a very renowned pianist and conductor. He actually collects very, very different material. He's been collecting since he was a very young man. He collected more. He's got some very, very big names like Andy Warhol and Paul Klee, and that sort of material. Works on paper, by the way. But he also has always had a very deep interest in untrained artists. Not so much outsider, that's a slightly different term in a way, but he also has interest in but maybe artists who don't have a formal training. So this piece is by Emery Blackburn. Yeah. It's, again, he always worked with things that were found materials. So this is just a stick of wood, and these are found bullets that he put in there. Emery Blackburn was a very interesting artist, again self-taught, who was discovered really by a local pharmacist by accident in a way. He walked into his pharmacy and asked him certain materials he wanted to use, and they became friends. And so he went to this barn in the middle of nowhere, and there was this massive healing machine, is what it's called, and it's basically made of pieces of wire, found wood, all sorts of different materials. That whole healing machine is now actually taken on by a museum in America, so it's there, preserved. We have 2 pieces here. Again, so this is actually, I suppose, more from Christian's American side, interest in objects. Again, it's a self-taught artist. We don't know when this piece was made, sometime between 1955 and 1986 when the artist died. It doesn't matter when this was made. It doesn't really make any difference. It's a very powerful piece. It's quite different in a way than some of the other things he has, I think, but it's a strong piece. There's another artist called James Castle, who was behind me, exactly, who was an artist who was born deaf, and from a very young age started drawing and painting with sticks and soot and always sort of local little interiors and portraits, very crude portraits. Those are the sort of artists that he's very taken by. And you can see that there is a connection maybe with Tantra, which is, actually Tantra is always anonymous, but is often untrained or sometimes very highly trained, of course, priests, so to say. But it's again that sort of, there is a connection there, I think. He then combines that with other artists such as Louise Bourgeois, which is on my other side here, which is of course a very, very well-known artist, but is an artist who's also maybe interested in the slightly, how do you call that, not outsider world, but has a connection to
unconscious.
I think unconsciousness,
children,
This is a very early drawing by Louise Bourgeois, 1939. And so it's very rare to find early work by him. You see the very fine ink drawing. She was very interested in, I mean, this has a lot of meaning to her, the escape, the longing for something else. Louise Bourgeois made drawings every day.
Oh, really?
She was very prolific. And I've spoken to one or two people I know who actually have been to visit her in her house. She had a lot of visitors. She was always drawing. Her works on paper production is vast. And particularly the later works, you see quite a lot. They're much bolder, of course, than this. This is very subtle, very fine. They're much more black lines with red ink. And I think there's also very much a connection with how I like to work or like to live, is that you have these anonymous little, let's say even slightly dirty pieces of paper, found paper with little sort of scribbles. And then he combines it next to the most beautiful Louise Bourgeois or Andy Warhol. And it works. I think when these works are really good quality, they work together very well. And that's something that I always have been attracted to. And I like to have Indian sculpture right next to a Japanese modern vase. And why not? I think if it works, it's great. Then he wanted to do something for his 70th birthday, which was late last year. And so that's why we came up with this idea to show 2 works by each artist from his collection. I mean, he's got quite a big collection. There's only a small selection. And then we added that with a couple of things that would have fit very well into his collection from my inventory. And there's a few things that I bought especially for the show with his kind of, we discussed everything together, let's put it that way. So sort of, I hate the word curate, but we curated it together. So I've been showing, for example, the work by Alexander Golitsky, which he has always liked. I am working with an English artist called Nicola Durkasala, who lived for a long time in India and is very influenced by Indian art, and her work has a real connection to India. And again, Christian saw that work and really reacted to it, and so bought a number of works from her. I think Nicola's work touches a bit on the Tantra as well, the void, the emptiness, the contemplation that we can see in these works. And the circular work is done with water that she took back from the Ganges, from the river Ganges. So there is I don't know if I like the word spiritual very much, but there is that sort of connection. So there is a connection again with India. Same with Alexander, he makes these very contemporary Indian miniature paintings. The ones that I have here are very, very abstract, but he also does more figurative work. I have certainly, and that's maybe a bit of influence from Christian as well. He did ask me, for example, to find some Calicut paintings. Calicut is this particular type of paintings done for the Temple of Kali. They're done in the sort of 19th century, and they are more sort of, not tribal is the wrong word, but more provincial sort of style in a way, more not fine art, so to say. And so, again, immediately you think, that's exactly what Krishna is looking for, is that sort of, not the fine high art, it's always anonymous again. So I knew the art and I had handled one or two pieces, but partly because of talking with him again, I started looking at it again more and found one by chance that he bought, found some others. And then with this show, it seemed totally logical to find some more work to add to that, so we did. And then I showed him some of the Orissa paintings, which he wasn't aware of, and he immediately bought them, because it's again that sort of slightly unknown Indian art. I mean, I think these are fantastic. It's like pop art. It's so vibrant. It is devotional, and these would the people who are the devotees of these temples would go to visit the temple. They'd buy these as a sort of memory and for home use, and can't really say tourist pieces, but in a way they are. You know, they so with some of these were made in huge quantities. They're all hand painted, so they're all slightly different.
I'm really intrigued by that object up there as well.
That's a very good object. So that's Indian,
Okay.
and it is very much related to the tantra kind of things that I do in. It's the void. So it would have had the void itself, of course, is a metaphorical sort of imaginary figure. This may have had a little deity hanging in the center of it that you would worship, but I've never seen a complete one. So it's the human form, but you have the imagination of what's in there. This is probably related to death and to the afterlife. Death is, I think, in Indian culture much more a accepted thing and a more it's part of life sort of thing. That we have that fear here. There is less of a fear in a way. I think in India, it's more an accepted thing to depict, and certainly in Tantrism as well. This is not Jain. This is not necessarily strictly Tantra, but it has all of that in there. And Kadaram did fantasy work, but it's all related to it. But it doesn't have a particular strict meaning as such. And in a way, the exhibition we have here is, of course, a lot of Western art as well.
Yeah.
And maybe that's surprising to some people because it's not really what I deal in. On the other hand, it is actually what I live with at home, is a lot of Western art. So there is a connection again, and I think Christian knows that. And over the years, I've talked about so many of these artists and Western things. So it sort of does make sense to show that. And I think for me, it's very exciting to show something very, very different than what I'm known for and what I deal with. I think one artist that we should maybe look at is Bergh. He was a German artist that when Christian was shown his work initially by a gallerist, he kind of thought, what is this? This is strange. I don't get it. Bergh would paint throughout his career, throughout his life, a glass of water. He would do this 4 or 5 times a week. He did other things as well, but that was kind of what he's really known for. And you would think, why? You do the same thing every time? That's just the most boring thing on earth. And I think that's what Christian initially thought as well. Then he sort of met Bergh, he got to know him a bit. Bergh came to his house and put a row of these 10 or 12 of these paintings out on the mantelpiece, all glass of water. And suddenly something clicked in Christian, and I thought, actually, yeah, I can see something here. So he bought, I think, 2 or 3. And over the years, they became very good friends, and he bought more of these glasses of water. And you can see, in a way, I think for me as well, when you initially see this, you think, well, what's the point? But of course, each glass of water is different. And each glass of water has been painted in a different date. And plus, he's done this over a period of 40-something years. So the light is different in a room, of course. The mood of the painter is different. The emotion, the age that he's at, it changes. Every class is different. But there is, of course, repetition. And I think that's something that Christian's very interested in himself as well. Because in their conversations today, at some point, Christian realized that he very often would play the same little encore after a concert. was always the same Scarlatti piece. And it's sort of a slightly unknown, I think. It was a subconscious thing, but he kind of realized that he often did that. So they then came up with this idea to make a CD of some 20 odd recordings of the same little Scarlatti piece that he would record over a number of years. And some of them are done on his mobile phone, some of them are done by professional microphones in concert halls all over the world. One is done on a really terribly tuned piano. Always the same piece. And it's the same as that glass of water that he painted every day. And so they made this CD together, which I have here. And then Peter Dreyer did little portraits of Scarlatti at the front. So again, repetition.
Yeah.
And some people will probably say that's the most crazy idea and it will drive you nuts after having heard 3 of them. I think it's fascinating because each piece is different, like a glass of water. And so that's the sort of friendships that Christian is very interested in, I think, and they happen without plan, of course. But I think Peter Dreyer is therefore quite an important artist in his collection.
This exhibition is currently available to view by appointment. Get in touch to learn more.